Marcus Johnson adjusted his worn baseball cap and pulled the collar of his faded jacket higher as he approached the glass doors of the SuperValue grocery store in downtown Detroit. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked pavement of the parking lot, where a few early shoppers hurried past with their carts. To anyone watching, Marcus looked like just another customer getting an early start on his weekend shopping. Nobody would guess that he owned this store and 47 others just like it across the Midwest. The disguise was perfect. His usual designer suits had been replaced with clothes from a thrift store, his expensive watch hidden beneath the sleeve of a threadbare sweatshirt. Even his normally well-groomed beard had been allowed to grow scraggly over the past week. Marcus had spent months planning this undercover visit, determined to see what really happened in his stores when the corporate executives weren't around. As the automatic doors slid open with their familiar whoosh, Marcus was hit by the familiar smell of fresh bread from the bakery, mixed with the faint scent of floor cleaner. The store was already bustling with activity despite the early hour. He grabbed a shopping cart and began to wander the aisles, his trained eye taking in details that most customers would never notice. The produce section looked good. Fruits and vegetables were properly displayed, prices clearly marked, and he noticed one of the stockers carefully removing wilted lettuce leaves from the display. That was exactly the kind of attention to detail he wanted to see. Marcus made a mental note to commend whoever was managing this section. Moving through the store, he observed the employees going about their morning routines. Most seemed focused and professional, greeting customers with genuine smiles and helping when asked. This was encouraging. Marcus had built his chain on the principle of excellent customer service, and it seemed like that message was getting through, at least in some areas. But as he rounded the corner toward the checkout lanes, something caught his attention that made him slow his pace. At register number 3, a young woman with her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail was ringing up items for an elderly customer. Even from a distance, Marcus could see that something was wrong. The cashier's movements seemed mechanical, and there was something about her posture that suggested distress. Marcus pretended to study the magazine rack nearby, positioning himself where he could observe without being obvious. The cashier was African American, probably in her early 20s, with a name tag that read Keisha. She was handling each item with care, double-bagging the heavy ones without being asked, and her interaction with the elderly customer was polite and professional. But Marcus noticed something that made his chest tighten with concern. Keisha was crying, not sobbing or making any noise that would draw attention. These were the quiet tears of someone trying desperately to hold herself together while doing her job. She would quickly wipe her eyes with the back of her hand between customers, thinking nobody was watching. Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. As a business owner, he prided himself on creating workplaces where people felt valued and supported. Seeing one of his employees in such obvious distress while still trying to serve customers with dignity made him feel like he had failed in some fundamental way. He moved closer, pretending to shop for items near the checkout area. The elderly customer finished her transaction and moved on, and for just a moment, Keisha allowed her professional mask to slip. She pressed her fingers to her temples and took a shaky breath that Marcus could see even from several feet away. The next customer in line was a middle-aged man with an armload of items and an impatient expression. As Keisha began scanning his groceries, Marcus could hear fragments of their conversation. "Can you move a little faster?" the man said, not unkindly but with obvious irritation. "I'm already running late." "Yes, sir. I'm sorry," Keisha replied, her voice steady despite the tears that Marcus could see still glistening in her eyes. She picked up the pace, her movements becoming more hurried. The man glanced at his watch and sighed audibly. "Look, I don't mean to be rude, but this is taking forever. Is there someone else who can ring me up?" Marcus saw Keisha's shoulders sag slightly. "I'm moving as fast as I can, sir. I apologize for any delay." "Well, maybe you should be," the man muttered, not quite under his breath. That was when Marcus heard something that stopped him cold. As Keisha continued scanning items, she whispered something so quietly that only someone standing very close could have heard it. But Marcus was close enough, and what she said made his blood run cold. "Please God," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please don't let them take my babies." Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. The shopping basket in his hands suddenly felt impossibly heavy, and he had to grip the handle tighter to keep from dropping it. Those 7 words told him more about Keisha's situation than any employee file or performance review ever could. This wasn't just about a bad day at work or dealing with difficult customers. This young woman was facing something much more serious, something that threatened her family. The impatient customer finished his transaction and left without so much as a thank you. Keisha took a moment to compose herself, wiping her eyes quickly with a tissue she pulled from her pocket. Marcus watched as she straightened her shoulders and put on her professional smile just as the next customer approached her register. This customer was a woman with 2 young children who were being particularly energetic, climbing on the shopping cart and asking for candy from the displays near the checkout. Instead of showing any irritation at the chaos, Keisha's face lit up with what Marcus could tell was genuine warmth. "Good morning," she said to the woman, then bent down slightly to address the children. "And good morning to you too as well. Are you helping Mom with the shopping today?" The little boy, who couldn't have been more than 5, nodded enthusiastically. "I helped her pick out cereal." "That's wonderful," Keisha said, beginning to scan items. "What kind did you pick?" "The one with the tiger on it," the boy announced proudly. "That's a good choice," Keisha agreed, holding up the box of cereal as she scanned it. "Tigers are very strong, just like you're going to be after you eat this." Marcus watched in amazement as Keisha transformed before his eyes. Despite whatever personal crisis was causing her such pain, she had found the strength to bring joy to these children and their mother. Her smile was genuine, her laughter real as she continued to chat with the family throughout the transaction. When the little girl dropped her small toy on the floor, Keisha immediately came around the counter to retrieve it, dusting it off before handing it back with a wink. "There you go, sweetie. Can't lose something that important." The mother smiled gratefully. "Thank you so much. You've made their day." "They've made mine too," Keisha replied, and Marcus could hear the sincerity in her voice. As the family left, Keisha's smile faded, and the weight of whatever she was carrying settled back onto her shoulders. She glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then pulled out her phone and quickly typed what appeared to be a text message. Marcus couldn't see what she was writing, but the expression on her face as she read the response made his heart ache. Marcus realized he needed to find out more about Keisha's situation, but he had to be careful not to blow his cover. He decided to get in her line, hoping he might learn something that would help him understand what was happening in her life. As he approached her register, Keisha looked up and gave him the same professional smile she had offered every other customer. "Good morning. Did you find everything you were looking for today?" "Yes, thank you," Marcus replied, studying her face more closely now that he was directly in front of her. Up close, he could see that her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, and there were faint stress lines around them that seemed too pronounced for someone so young. Her name tag was slightly crooked, and her uniform, while clean, showed signs of wear that suggested she couldn't afford to replace it very often. As Keisha began scanning his items, Marcus tried to think of a way to start a conversation that might give him insight into her situation without seeming intrusive. He settled on something simple and genuine. "You seem like you're having a tough morning," he said gently. "I hope things get better for you." Keisha looked up, surprised by the kindness in his voice. For a moment, her professional mask slipped, and Marcus saw raw vulnerability in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "That's very kind of you to say. Sometimes we all need someone to remind us that we're not alone," Marcus continued, watching her reaction carefully. Keisha's hand paused over the scanner, and Marcus saw her take a deep breath. "You're right about that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus paid for his items, leaving a generous tip in the charity jar next to her register. As he prepared to leave, he turned back to Keisha one more time. "Whatever you're going through," he said quietly, "I hope you know that things can get better. Sometimes help comes from places we don't expect." Keisha's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they seemed to be tears of gratitude rather than despair. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that today." Marcus left the store with his mind racing. He walked to his car and sat in the parking lot, staring back at the building that housed not just his business, but the livelihood of dozens of families. Keisha's whispered prayer echoed in his mind. "Please don't let them take my babies." He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. Patricia, I need you to do something for me. And I need it done quietly. I want you to pull the employee file for someone named Keisha who works at the downtown Detroit store. Don't contact the store directly. Just get me whatever information we have on file. Of course, Mr. Johnson. Is everything all right? Marcus looked back at the store, where he could see Keisha through the large windows, still at her register, still serving customers with grace and professionalism despite whatever personal crisis was threatening to tear her world apart. I'm not sure yet, he said, but I'm going to find out. As Marcus drove away, he couldn't stop thinking about the contradiction he had witnessed. Here was a young woman who was clearly facing a crisis serious enough to involve her children being taken away, yet she was still showing up to work every day and treating customers with kindness and respect. She had every reason to be bitter, distracted, or unprofessional, yet she had taken the time to make two small children smile and feel special. The more Marcus thought about it, the more he realized that Keisha represented something he had been looking for without even knowing it. In all his years of business, he had seen countless employees who did their jobs adequately, and some who went above and beyond when things were going well in their lives. But it was rare to find someone who could maintain their humanity and compassion when their personal world was falling apart. That evening, Marcus sat in his home office, which overlooked the Detroit River. The city lights twinkled in the gathering darkness as he waited for Patricia to send him Keisha's employee information. When his computer chimed with the incoming email, he opened it immediately. What he read made his heart sink even further. Keisha Williams, 23 years old, had been working at the store for 8 months. She was a single mother with 2 children, ages 3 and 5. Her employment record was exemplary, with perfect attendance and multiple customer commendations. Her supervisor had noted that she was reliable, hardworking, and always willing to help other employees when needed. But there was something in the file that Marcus hadn't expected to see. 3 weeks ago, Keisha had requested an advance on her pay, which had been approved by the store manager. 2 weeks before that, she had asked about picking up additional shifts. The pattern suggested someone who was struggling financially, which might explain the crisis she seemed to be facing. Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing this information. Here was someone who was clearly giving her best effort despite personal difficulties. Yet she was still struggling to make ends meet. It made him question whether his company was doing enough to support employees who were trying to better their lives. He thought about the whispered prayer he had overheard. Please don't let them take my babies. The more he considered it, the more convinced he became that Keisha was facing some kind of legal or social services issue related to her children. The stress of potentially losing her kids would explain the tears, the desperation he had sensed, and her determination to keep working despite her obvious emotional distress. Marcus made a decision that would change not only Keisha's life, but his own understanding of what it meant to be a responsible employer. He was going to find out exactly what Keisha was facing, and he was going to help her through it. But first, he needed to understand the full scope of her situation. The next morning, Marcus returned to the store, once again in his disguise. He arrived even earlier this time, wanting to observe how Keisha started her shift. He positioned himself near the customer service desk, where he could see the employee entrance without being obvious. Keisha arrived exactly on time, hurrying through the doors with her purse clutched tightly to her side. Even from a distance, Marcus could see the tension in her movements. She paused just inside the entrance to check her phone, and whatever she read made her close her eyes and take several deep breaths before continuing toward the employee break room. Marcus followed at a discreet distance, pretending to browse the seasonal items near the back of the store. Through the partially open break room door, he could hear Keisha talking on her phone in a voice tight with stress. No, Mrs. Patterson, I understand what you're saying, but I'm doing everything I can, she was saying. I've been working extra shifts. I've never missed a payment on anything. I just need a little more time. There was a pause as she listened to whoever was on the other end of the call. Please, Keisha continued, and Marcus could hear the desperation in her voice. They're good kids. They're happy and healthy and loved. I know I made mistakes in the past, but I'm different now. This job, it's helping me get my life together. I just need you to see that. Marcus felt his chest tighten as he began to understand what Keisha was facing. It sounded like she was dealing with Child Protective Services, probably as a result of past difficulties that she was now trying to overcome. The fact that she was working so hard to prove herself, combined with her obvious love for her children, painted a picture of someone who deserved support, not judgment. When Keisha emerged from the break room a few minutes later, her eyes were red again. But she had composed herself for another day of work. Marcus watched her clock in and make her way to her assigned register, where she began the routine of setting up her station for the day ahead. As the store filled with customers and Keisha began serving the following Monday morning, Marcus Johnson sat in his corporate office 30 floors above downtown Detroit. But his mind was still in the SuperValue store where Keisha Williams was probably just starting her shift. Over the weekend, he had done extensive research into the challenges facing single mothers in the Detroit area, and what he had learned had both educated and horrified him. According to the statistics he had gathered, nearly 40% of single mothers in Detroit lived below the poverty line, despite many of them working full-time jobs. The childcare costs alone could consume more than half of a minimum wage paycheck, leaving families with impossible choices between keeping a job and properly caring for their children. Add to that the complex web of social services, legal requirements, and bureaucratic hurdles that families in crisis often faced, and it was a wonder that someone like Keisha could function at all, much less excel at her job. Marcus had built his business empire by recognizing opportunities that others missed, but this felt different. This wasn't about profit margins or market share. This was about human dignity and the responsibility that came with being someone who could make a real difference in people's lives. Patricia knocked on his office door and entered with a stack of files. "I have the information you requested about employee assistance programs and community partnerships," she said, setting the documents on his desk. "I also took the liberty of researching some successful corporate social responsibility initiatives that other companies have implemented." "Thank you," Marcus said, immediately beginning to flip through the materials. "What did you find about our current employee support systems?" Patricia sat down across from his desk, consulting her notes. "Honestly, Mr. Johnson, it's pretty basic. We offer health insurance after 90 days, 2 weeks of paid vacation after a year, and there's a small emergency loan program that most employees don't even know about. Compared to what some other companies are doing, we're not really setting any standards for employee care." Marcus nodded, not surprised but disappointed nonetheless. "What about companies that are doing better?" "There are some interesting examples," Patricia continued. "Some companies have on-site childcare. Others offer emergency childcare assistance, educational support, even legal aid for employees facing certain types of problems. A few have what they call life coaches who help employees navigate challenges that might affect their work performance." "Legal aid," Marcus repeated, thinking about the phone conversation he had overheard. "That could be exactly what someone like Keisha needs." "There's also something else I thought you might be interested in," Patricia said, pulling out a separate folder. "I found several companies that have what they call guardian angel programs, where management identifies employees who are going above and beyond despite personal challenges, and they provide targeted support to help those people succeed." Marcus felt a spark of excitement. "That's exactly the kind of thing I've been thinking about. What would it take to implement something like that?" "It would require some careful planning," Patricia admitted. "Legal considerations, privacy issues, making sure we don't show favoritism or create resentment among other employees. But it could be done." Marcus spent the rest of the morning reviewing the materials Patricia had provided, but his concentration kept being interrupted by thoughts of Keisha. Finally, he made a decision that he knew would surprise everyone, including himself. "Patricia, clear my schedule for this afternoon. I'm going back to the store." "Again?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. "Mr. Johnson, don't you think the disguise might be getting a little risky? What if someone recognizes you?" "Then, I'll deal with that when it happens," Marcus said, already reaching for the casual clothes he now kept in his office closet. "But I need to understand what's really happening in that store before I can make any meaningful changes." An hour later, Marcus was once again walking through the aisles of the SuperValue store, this time with a specific mission. He wanted to observe not just Keisha, but the entire workplace dynamic. How did the managers treat their employees? How did employees interact with each other? Were there signs of stress or dissatisfaction that he had missed during his previous visits? What he discovered was both encouraging and troubling. The store was generally well run, with most employees seeming engaged and professional. But Marcus began to notice subtle signs of tension that hadn't registered during his earlier visits. Some employees seemed rushed and stressed. Others appeared to be going through the motions without any real enthusiasm for their work. At the customer service desk, he overheard a conversation between two employees that made him pause. "Did you hear that Keisha asked for more hours again?" one was saying. "Yeah, I heard she's trying to pick up shifts from anyone who wants to give them up," the other replied. "Must be nice to have that kind of energy. I can barely handle the hours I already have. I think she's got some kind of situation going on at home," the first employee said, lowering her voice. Sarah from the night shift said she saw Keisha crying in the parking lot after work last week. "Poor girl. Single mom, right? That's got to be tough." Marcus moved away from the conversation, but it confirmed what he had suspected. Keisha's situation was becoming known among her coworkers, which meant it was affecting the workplace dynamic whether anyone realized it or not. Other employees were noticing her stress, her need for extra hours, her emotional state. While they seemed sympathetic, Marcus understood that workplace dynamics were delicate, and one person's crisis could impact everyone's morale if not handled properly. He made his way toward the checkout area, where he could see Keisha at her usual station. Today she seemed calmer than during his previous visits, but Marcus had developed an eye for reading the subtle signs of stress in her posture and movements. She was functioning, but just barely holding things together. As he watched, something happened that made Marcus's plan crystallize in his mind. A customer approached Keisha's register with a cart full of groceries and what appeared to be a fussy toddler. The child was crying and reaching for items on the nearby displays, making the shopping experience difficult for everyone involved. Instead of showing any irritation at the disruption, Keisha immediately engaged with the child in a way that was both natural and effective. "Oh my," she said in an animated voice. "Someone sounds like they might be tired. Shopping is hard work, isn't it?" The child stopped crying and looked at Keisha with curious eyes. "I bet you've been helping your mom pick out all these groceries," Keisha continued, beginning to scan items while maintaining eye contact with the toddler. "That's a big job for someone your size." The mother looked grateful as her child calmed down. "Thank you," she said to Keisha. "He's been like this all morning." "Oh, I completely understand," Keisha replied, and Marcus could hear the genuine empathy in her voice. "My little ones get like that too when they're tired or hungry. Sometimes they just need someone to acknowledge how they're feeling." As Keisha continued scanning items, she kept up a gentle conversation with both the mother and child, transforming what could have been a stressful transaction into a positive experience for everyone involved. Marcus watched the mother's face relax and saw the child actually smile by the time the transaction was complete. "Thank you so much," the mother said as she gathered her bags. "You made our whole day better." "That's what I'm here for," Keisha replied, and Marcus knew she meant every word. After the family left, Marcus saw Keisha take a deep breath and check her phone quickly. Whatever she read made her face tighten with worry, and she glanced around nervously before tucking the phone back into her pocket. Marcus decided it was time to take action. He approached her register with just a few items, timing his arrival during a brief lull in customer traffic. "Good afternoon," Keisha said, giving him the same warm smile she had offered the stressed mother. "How are you doing today?" "I'm doing well, thank you," Marcus replied, then added, "I was here a few days ago, and I couldn't help but notice how well you handled a difficult situation with a customer. That kind of grace under pressure is rare." Keisha looked surprised. "Oh, thank you. I just try to treat people the way I'd want to be treated." "That's exactly what I mean," Marcus said, studying her face. "Can I ask you something? Do you feel like your work here is appreciated by management?" The question clearly caught Keisha off guard. She paused in her scanning and looked at Marcus with a mixture of confusion and caution. "Ah, yes, sir. My supervisors are fair to me." "Why do you ask?" Marcus had to be careful here. He couldn't reveal his identity yet, but he wanted to understand how she perceived her place in the company. "I'm actually in management myself, just at a different company," he said, which was technically true. "I'm always interested in how businesses treat their employees, especially ones who go above and beyond like you clearly do." Keisha resumed scanning his items, but Marcus could see that his words had made an impact. I appreciate you saying that, she said quietly. I do try my best. I can see that. But I also can't help but notice that you seem to be carrying some stress. Is there support available for employees who might be going through personal challenges? For a moment, Keisha's professional composure wavered. Marcus saw her hands tremble slightly as she handled his groceries, and her eyes filled with the tears that were never far from the surface. I'm sorry, she said, quickly wiping her eyes. I shouldn't be discussing personal matters at work. You have nothing to apologize for, Marcus said gently. We're all human. We all face challenges. The question is whether your workplace recognizes that and tries to help. Keisha finished scanning his items and quoted him the total, but Marcus could see that she was struggling to maintain her composure. As he handed her his payment, he made a decision that would change everything. Keisha, he said, and her eyes widened in surprise that he knew her name. My name is Marcus, and I want you to know that there are people who see how hard you're working and how much you care about your job and your customers. Sometimes help comes from unexpected places. Keisha stared at him, confusion and hope warring in her expression. I don't understand. Marcus took his receipt and gathered his bags, then looked directly into her eyes. What if I told you that there might be resources available to help you with whatever challenges you're facing? Would you be willing to listen? Keisha's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Finally, she managed to whisper, Are you serious? Completely serious, Marcus replied. Sometimes the universe puts people in our path exactly when we need them most. Before Keisha could respond, another customer approached her register, ending their conversation. But Marcus could see that his words had planted a seed of hope in her mind. As he walked away, he heard her greet the next customer with what sounded like genuine enthusiasm for the first time since he had been observing her. Marcus left the store and drove directly to his lawyer's office. If he was going to help Keisha, he needed to understand exactly what kind of legal and bureaucratic challenges she was facing, and he needed to make sure that any assistance he provided was both effective and appropriate. His lawyer, David Chun, was one of the best corporate attorneys in Detroit, but Marcus knew he also had connections throughout the legal community, including those who specialized in family law and social services issues. Marcus, good to see you, David said, welcoming him into his office. Patricia said you had some questions about employee assistance programs? That's right. But it's more specific than that, Marcus replied, settling into the chair across from David's desk. I need to understand the legal landscape around child protective services, particularly for single mothers who are trying to get their lives together. David raised an eyebrow. That's quite a departure from your usual corporate concerns. Is this related to one of your employees? Potentially, Marcus said. What I'm learning is that there are people working in my stores who are dealing with challenges that go far beyond what I ever imagined. I want to understand what kind of help they might need and what kind of help I can legally and appropriately provide. David leaned back in his chair, considering the question. Well, the family court system in Michigan can be complex, especially when it comes to cases involving child welfare. Single parents, particularly those with limited financial resources, often find themselves navigating a system that seems designed to work against them, even when their intentions are good. What kind of situations are we talking about? It could be anything, David explained. Sometimes it starts with something as simple as a neighbor complaint or a missed doctor's appointment. If there's a history of any kind of problems, even minor ones, the system tends to be very cautious. Parents can find themselves required to jump through hoops to prove their fitness, even when they're doing everything right. Marcus felt his anger building as he thought about Keisha working so hard while simultaneously fighting to keep her children. What kind of hoops? Parenting classes, drug testing, home visits, supervised visitation, financial stability requirements. The list can be extensive, and it's often expensive and time-consuming. A parent might be required to maintain steady employment while also attending mandatory classes and court hearings. It's a nearly impossible balancing act for someone without resources. And if they can't manage all of that, David's expression grew grim. Then, they risk losing their children, sometimes permanently. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Detroit skyline. Somewhere out there, Keisha was finishing her shift, probably worried sick about whether she would see her children that night. The injustice of it made his chest tight with anger and determination. "David, I want you to put together a team," he said, turning back to his lawyer. "I want the best family law attorney in the state, someone who specializes in helping parents navigate the child welfare system. I also want you to research every legal way a corporation can provide assistance to employees facing these kinds of challenges." "Marcus, that sounds like it could be quite expensive, and there might be some liability issues to consider." "I don't care about the expense," Marcus replied firmly. "And I want you to figure out how to minimize any liability while maximizing the help we can provide. Think of it as a new kind of employee benefit program." David made notes as Marcus spoke, but Marcus could see the concern in his expression. "Can I ask what prompted this sudden interest in family law?" Marcus thought about Keisha's whispered prayer, about the way she had made that little child smile despite her own pain, about the gratitude in her eyes when he had offered her simple kindness. "I met someone who reminded me that a business is only as good as the people who make it run," he said. "And some of those people are fighting battles we never even knew existed." By Thursday evening, Marcus had everything in place. His attorney David Chun had assembled a team that included the city's most respected family law specialist, a social worker who understood the child welfare system, and a financial counselor who specialized in helping families in crisis. Marcus had also worked with his human resources department to create what they were calling the Employee Guardian Program, a comprehensive support system that could be implemented immediately for any employee facing extraordinary circumstances. But the most important part of his plan was still the most delicate, revealing his identity to Keisha and offering help without making her feel like an object of pity. Marcus arrived at the SuperValue store just as the evening shift was beginning. He had learned from the schedule that Keisha was working until 9 o'clock, giving him several hours to observe and plan his approach. Tonight, however, he wasn't alone. David Chun was with him, also disguised as a customer, ready to provide immediate legal consultation if Keisha was willing to accept help. "Are you sure about this approach?" David asked quietly as they entered the store. "There are more traditional ways to offer employee assistance. Traditional approaches don't work for extraordinary situations," Marcus replied. "Keisha doesn't need a pamphlet about our employee assistance program. She needs immediate, comprehensive help, and she needs to know that someone in a position of power sees her worth and is willing to fight for her." As they made their way through the store, Marcus spotted Keisha at her usual register. Even from a distance, he could see that something was different about her tonight. Her movements seemed more agitated, and she kept checking her phone between customers with an urgency that suggested she had received disturbing news. Marcus positioned himself where he could observe without being obvious, and what he saw made his heart sink. Keisha was barely holding herself together. Her hands were shaking as she scanned items, and twice he saw her have to step away from her register to compose herself when there were no customers in line. Finally, during a brief break in customer traffic, Marcus saw Keisha pull out her phone and make a call. Even from several feet away, he could see the desperation in her posture as she hunched over the phone, clearly trying to have a private conversation in a public space. "Mrs. Patterson, please," he heard her say, her voice tight with stress. "I know what the court order says, but I'm scheduled to work tonight. I can't just leave. I'll lose my job." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Whatever crisis Keisha was facing had apparently reached a critical point. "Yes, I understand that tomorrow is the deadline," Keisha continued, her voice breaking. "But I'm doing everything you asked. I've completed the parenting classes, I've passed every drug test, I've attended every meeting. What more do you want from me?" There was a long pause as Keisha listened to the person on the other end of the call. Marcus saw her free hand clench into a fist, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely controlled. "So you're telling me that if I don't produce $1,500 by tomorrow afternoon, you're going to recommend permanent placement?" she whispered. "For a fine that I can't afford to pay because I've been spending everything on the classes and requirements you mandated?" Marcus looked at David, who had also overheard the conversation. The lawyer's expression was grim but determined. "Legal fees," David murmured. "Court costs, probably some kind of administrative fine. It's a common trap in the system. They require parents to pay for the very services that are supposed to prove their fitness." Keisha ended the call and stood frozen for a moment, staring at her phone. Then, Marcus watched as she did something that broke his heart. She straightened her shoulders, wiped her eyes, and put her professional smile back on as the next customer approached her register. "Good evening," she said to the customer, her voice steady despite the tears that Marcus could see threatening to fall. "Did you find everything you were looking for tonight?" Marcus had seen enough. He walked quickly to the store manager's office, where he found Tom Bradley, the store manager he had hired 2 years ago but had never met in person. "Excuse me," Marcus said, knocking on the open door. "I wonder if I could speak with you for a moment." Tom looked up from his paperwork with a polite but slightly impatient expression. "Sure, what can I help you with?" Marcus stepped into the office and closed the door behind him. "My name is Marcus Johnson. I own this store." Tom's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, recognition, and, finally, panic. He shot to his feet so quickly that his chair rolled backward into the wall. "Mr. Johnson." "Sir, I had no idea you were. I mean, we weren't expecting. Is there a problem?" "Sit down, Tom," Marcus said calmly. "And relax. I'm not here because of any problem with the store. In fact, from what I've observed, you're running an excellent operation." Tom sat back down but remained visibly nervous. "Thank you, sir. But I have to ask, why are you here in disguise?" "I've been conducting some undercover research into our operations," Marcus explained. "What I've found is that we have some exceptional employees who are facing personal challenges that go beyond anything our current support systems can handle." "I see," Tom said, though it was clear he didn't really understand. "Tell me about Keisha Williams," Marcus continued. Tom's expression immediately grew concerned. "Keisha? She's one of our best employees, sir. Perfect attendance, excellent customer service scores, always willing to help other staff members. Is there some kind of problem?" "Not with her work performance," Marcus said. "But I have reason to believe she's facing some serious personal difficulties that are affecting her well-being." "What do you know about her situation?" Tom hesitated, clearly torn between employee privacy concerns and his boss's direct question. "Well, sir, I know she's a single mother, and I know she's been asking for extra shifts lately. She seems stressed sometimes, but she's never let it affect her work. I actually gave her an advance on her pay a few weeks ago because she said she had some unexpected expenses. Have you noticed any changes in her behavior recently?" "Now that you mention it, yes," Tom admitted. "She seems more anxious lately, and I've seen her taking some phone calls that clearly upset her. But, sir, she's never asked for help or indicated that there was anything the company could do to assist her." Marcus nodded. "That's because she doesn't know what kind of help is available. Tom, I want you to call Keisha to the office. Tell her there's a customer who wants to speak with her about her exceptional service." "Sir, just trust me on this," Marcus said. "And Tom, what happens in this office tonight stays in this office." "Understood." "Yes, sir. Absolutely." A few minutes later, there was a soft knock on the office door. Tom opened it to reveal Keisha, looking nervous and confused. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, glancing between Tom and Marcus with uncertainty. "Come in, Keisha," Marcus said gently. "Please have a seat." Keisha sat down in the chair across from Tom's desk, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked at Marcus with recognition but obvious confusion. "I know you," she said slowly. "You're the customer who's been coming in this week. The one who—" She trailed off, clearly uncertain about what was happening. Marcus leaned forward slightly, keeping his voice calm and reassuring. "Keisha, my name is Marcus Johnson. I'm the owner of this store and 47 others like it." Keisha's eyes widened, and Marcus saw her glance quickly toward the door as if she was considering fleeing. "You're not in trouble," Marcus said quickly. "In fact, you're the reason I'm here." "I don't understand," Keisha whispered. Marcus stood up and moved to the chair next to Keisha rather than staying behind the imposing desk. "For the past several days, I've been visiting this store in disguise, observing operations, and getting a real sense of how things work when corporate executives aren't around. What I found was an exceptionally well-run store with excellent employees. But I also found something that troubled me deeply." Keisha remained silent, but Marcus could see that she was listening intently. "I found an employee who was working harder than anyone had a right to ask, serving customers with grace and professionalism, all while facing personal challenges that would have broken most people. I watched you make children smile when you yourself were fighting tears. I heard you treat difficult customers with patience and kindness when you had every reason to be distracted by your own problems. Tears began to flow down Keisha's cheeks, but she didn't try to stop them. But I also heard you whisper a prayer that no parent should ever have to make, Marcus continued. I heard you beg God not to let them take your babies. Keisha's composure finally broke completely. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed, months of suppressed fear and stress finally finding release. Marcus waited patiently for her to collect herself, then handed her a box of tissues from Tom's desk. Keisha, I need you to listen to me very carefully, he said when she looked up. I overheard your phone call tonight. I know about the $1,500 and the deadline tomorrow. I know that you're facing the possibility of losing your children because of financial requirements that you can't meet despite working as hard as humanly possible. Keisha stared at him in shock. How did you? I mean, I tried to be discreet. You were discreet, Marcus assured her. But I was paying attention because I recognized something in you that reminded me why I got into business in the first place. You represent everything I want this company to stand for: integrity, compassion, resilience, and dedication to excellence even in the face of adversity. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, which he placed on the desk in front of Keisha. This contains a cashier's check for $2,500, he said. It's not a loan. It's not charity. It's a bonus for exceptional employee performance, which you have demonstrated beyond any reasonable doubt. Keisha stared at the envelope, but didn't touch it. Mr. Johnson, I can't accept this. It's too much. I don't deserve. Stop right there, Marcus said firmly but kindly. You absolutely deserve this, and more. But this is just the beginning. Marcus opened the office door, and David Chun entered, carrying a briefcase. Keisha, this is David Chun, one of the best attorneys in Detroit, Marcus said. David, meet Keisha Williams, the employee I told you about. David shook Keisha's hand with a warm smile. Ms. Williams, Marcus has told me about your situation, and I've brought along some colleagues who specialize in family law. If you're willing, we'd like to review your case and provide whatever legal assistance you need to resolve this matter permanently. Keisha looked back and forth between Marcus and David as if she couldn't quite believe what was happening. I don't understand. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Marcus sat back down next to her. Keisha, I've spent the last week watching you work. I've seen how you treat customers, how you interact with coworkers, how you handle stress and pressure. I've watched you maintain your dignity and compassion even when your world was falling apart. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are as a person. But this is so much more than any employer would ever do, Keisha said, her voice full of wonder. You're right, Marcus agreed. Most employers wouldn't do this. But most employers never take the time to really see their employees as complete human beings with lives and challenges and dreams beyond their job responsibilities. I learned something this week that I should have known all along. A company is only as strong as the people who make it work, and those people deserve support when they're fighting to build better lives for themselves and their families. Keisha picked up the envelope with trembling hands. This will save my children, she whispered. This will solve your immediate crisis, Marcus corrected. But we're going to do more than that. David and his team are going to make sure that you never have to face this kind of situation again without proper support and advocacy. And I'm going to make sure that other employees in similar situations have access to the same kind of comprehensive assistance. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the store floor where Keisha's coworkers were continuing to serve customers. You know what the most remarkable thing about this whole situation is, he said, turning back to Keisha. You could have let your personal problems affect your work performance. You could have been short with customers or resentful about your circumstances. Instead, you used your own experience as a struggling parent to connect more deeply with customers who were dealing with their own challenges. You turned your pain into compassion for others. Keisha wiped her eyes and stood up as well. My grandmother used to tell me that the best way to heal your own hurt is to help heal someone else's. I never forgot that. Your grandmother was a wise woman, Marcus said. And She raised someone who embodies the very best of human nature. David cleared his throat gently. Ms. Williams, if you're ready, I'd like to make some phone calls tonight. With that payment, we should be able to resolve your immediate situation, but I also want to review the entire case to make sure there aren't any other issues that need to be addressed. Keisha nodded, seeming to be in a state of shock. Yes, of course. Thank you. Marcus walked back to his chair and sat down again. Keisha, there's one more thing I want to discuss with you. Your performance over the past week, under circumstances that would have incapacitated most people, has been exceptional. That kind of character and resilience isn't something that can be taught. It's something that comes from within. Keisha waited for him to continue, clearly unsure where this was leading. I want to offer you a position in our corporate training department, Marcus said. We're launching a new program to train managers on how to recognize and support employees who might be facing personal challenges. I can't think of anyone better qualified to help develop that program than someone who has lived through these experiences and still managed to excel professionally. Keisha's mouth fell open. A corporate position? With a significant salary increase, full benefits, flexible scheduling to accommodate your family needs, and the opportunity to make a real difference in the lives of other employees across our entire chain, Marcus confirmed. For a moment, Keisha was completely speechless. Then, unexpectedly, she began to laugh through her tears. I'm sorry, she said, trying to compose herself. It's just that this morning I thought I was going to lose my children, and tonight you're offering me a dream job. It doesn't seem real. Marcus smiled. It's real, but, more importantly, you've earned it. Your response to adversity, your commitment to excellence, and your natural ability to connect with people make you exactly the kind of person I want helping to shape the future of this company. Tom, who had been silent throughout most of the conversation, finally spoke up. If I may say so, Mr. Johnson, this is going to be a tremendous loss for our store. Keisha is beloved by customers and staff alike. You're absolutely right, Tom, Marcus agreed. Which is why we're going to use Keisha's transition as an opportunity to test our new support systems. I want you to work with HR to identify any other employees who might be facing challenges that are affecting their ability to thrive. Keisha's situation can't be unique. Marcus turned back to Keisha. What do you say? Are you ready to help us build something that could change lives? Keisha stood up and extended her hand to Marcus. Mr. Johnson, you've already changed my life and my children's lives. I would be honored to help you change others. As Marcus shook her hand, he felt the same sense of purpose and satisfaction that he had experienced when he first started building his business empire. But this felt different, deeper, more meaningful than any financial success he had ever achieved. There's just one condition, Marcus said with a smile. You have to promise me that when you're working with other employees facing difficult situations, you'll remember what it felt like to believe that no one understood what you were going through. That empathy is going to be your greatest tool in helping others. I promise, Keisha said solemnly. I will never forget where I came from or how it felt to believe that I was invisible. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the same SuperValue store, but this time he was there in his official capacity as CEO. He was visiting to check on the implementation of the Employee Guardian program, which had already been activated to help 12 employees across the chain who were facing various crises. Keisha was with him, now wearing a crisp business suit and carrying a tablet where she tracked the progress of each case the program had taken on. Her transformation was remarkable, but what struck Marcus most was that she hadn't lost the warmth and compassion that had first caught his attention. The Rodriguez family situation has been completely resolved, she was telling him as they walked through the store. The father is back to work full-time, and their son is getting the medical treatment he needs. The Martinez case is more complex, but our legal team thinks we'll have a resolution within the next 2 weeks. Marcus nodded, pleased but not surprised by the program's success. What about the employee feedback? Are people comfortable coming forward when they need help? More and more each week, Keisha replied. I think word is getting out that this is real support, not just corporate lip service. People are starting to trust that we genuinely want to help them succeed. They paused near Register 3, where Keisha used to work. The new cashier, a young man named Devin, was efficiently serving customers with a smile. How's Devin working out? Marcus asked Tom, who had joined them for the visit. "Excellent," Tom replied. "Actually, he mentioned that he's taking night classes to become a teacher, but he's struggling with the tuition payments. I was thinking he might be a candidate for the education assistance part of the Guardian program." Keisha made a note on her tablet. "I'll talk with him before we leave today." As they continued through the store, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that morning when he had first heard Keisha's whispered prayer. The Employee Guardian program had become a model that other companies were asking to study and implement. More importantly, it had fundamentally changed the culture within Marcus's own company, creating an environment where employees felt valued not just for their work performance, but as complete human beings with complex lives and challenges. But perhaps the most significant change was in Marcus himself. The experience had reminded him that true leadership wasn't just about building successful businesses or generating profits. It was about recognizing the potential in others and creating opportunities for them to thrive. As they finished their tour and prepared to leave, Keisha turned to Marcus with a question that had clearly been on her mind. "Mr. Johnson, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Why did you really do all of this?" "I mean, helping me was incredibly generous, but creating an entire program that helps employees across the company, that goes far beyond any business rationale I can understand." Marcus considered the question carefully before answering. "Do you remember what you said about your grandmother teaching you that the best way to heal your own hurt is to help heal someone else's?" Keisha nodded. "I've been successful in business for a long time, but I'd lost sight of why I wanted to be successful in the first place. Watching you maintain your dignity and compassion while fighting to hold your family together reminded me what real strength looks like. Helping you wasn't just about solving your problem, Keisha. It was about rediscovering my own purpose." Marcus paused and looked around the store, where employees and customers were going about their daily routines, unaware of the conversations and decisions that had transformed this workplace into something more than just a place of business. "Besides," he added with a smile, "you taught me that the most valuable employees aren't necessarily the ones who have easy lives. Sometimes they're the ones who have learned to excel despite having difficult lives. That's a lesson worth building a whole program around." As they walked toward the exit, Keisha stopped suddenly and turned to face the store. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "I was just thinking about that morning when you first heard me pray not to lose my children," she said. "I felt so alone then, like nobody could see me or understand what I was going through. I never imagined that someone was not only seeing me, but planning to change my entire life." Marcus followed her gaze back into the store. "The question is, who else is out there right now feeling just as invisible as you felt then?" "That's exactly why this program matters so much," Keisha replied. "Because somewhere, right now, there's another single mother or struggling father or young person trying to build a better life. And they need to know that someone sees them and believes in their potential." As Marcus drove back to his corporate office that afternoon, he thought about the conversation with Keisha and about the dozens of employees who had already been helped by the Guardian program. But, mostly, he thought about the lesson that a young cashier had taught him without even knowing it. True success wasn't measured in profit margins or market share. It was measured in the positive impact you could have on the lives of others, and in the recognition that everyone had a story worth knowing and a potential worth nurturing. The program that had started with one overheard prayer had already grown into something that would outlast any quarterly earnings report or business achievement. It had become a legacy of human compassion and corporate responsibility that would continue to change lives long after Marcus was gone. And somewhere in Detroit, Keisha Williams was raising 2 children who would grow up knowing that sometimes, when you're at your lowest point and feel completely invisible, an angel might walk into your life disguised as a customer in a grocery store. As Marcus left David's office, he felt a sense of purpose that he hadn't experienced in years. Building a successful business had been satisfying, but this felt different. This felt like an opportunity to use his success to create real change in someone's life. But first, he needed to return to the store one more time. He had to find a way to approach Keisha directly and offer the help she so desperately needed. The challenge was doing it in a way that didn't compromise her dignity or make her feel like she was accepting charity. What Marcus didn't know was that Keisha had been thinking about their conversation all afternoon. The mysterious customer who had seemed to see straight through to her pain and offer hope had left her with questions she couldn't answer and a feeling she hadn't experienced in months. The feeling was hope. Them with the same grace and professionalism he had observed the day before. Marcus knew he had to act. But he also knew he had to be careful. Whatever help he offered had to be done in a way that preserved Keisha's dignity and didn't make her feel like a charity case. Marcus spent the rest of the morning observing not just Keisha, but the entire operation of the store. He noticed things that impressed him and things that needed improvement, but his primary focus kept returning to the young woman at Register 3 who was fighting to hold her family together while maintaining her commitment to excellent customer service. By the time he left the store that day, Marcus had formulated a plan. It was ambitious and would require careful coordination, but he believed it could make a real difference not just in Keisha's life, but in the lives of other employees who might be facing similar struggles. The plan would also test his company's stated commitment to being more than just an employer, but a positive force in the community. What Marcus didn't know was that his presence in the store, disguised though it was, had not gone completely unnoticed. Keisha had observed the kind stranger who had offered her encouragement the previous day, and something about his genuine concern had given her a small spark of hope in what had been a very dark time in her life. That spark of hope was about to become a flame that would light the way toward a future neither of them could have imagined.